Hi, and welcome to A Class of Their Own podcast, revealing the human stories behind their name. We will hear honest and intimate reflections from our guests who, despite their circumstances, shape a world that reflects their unique visions of success. Join me, Mira Magacha, to learn from these inspirational people and take the first step to make your own change. On today's episode, we are joined by Priyesh Khanderia. Who is Priyesh?
Many things really, but simply a human being, just on his adventure of life.
And where has that adventure of life taken you, or where has it come from?
To be honest, I think I've always had that urge to really experience life since I was a child. But the roller coaster has taken you on. No one's ever really prepared for that, to be honest.
And what's your roller coaster?
I guess starts off with a little boy from a Indian family who wants to just please his parents, but almost turns that into an obsession. And then people pleasing becomes a massive facet of my life for a big period. So the adventure is very much I think anyone's adventure is actually dictated by certain themes. So people pleasing definitely was one of mine, but also it's like there was always an inner idea that we're kind of competing against each other as humans. I think the world, especially when I was growing up, I feel like it really pushed that forward. You want to be better than the person in your class, you want to be better than this person, you're competing against your brother, your cousins and stuff like that. It's not something that's so spoken, but so I definitely enjoyed that. I think it definitely fed what felt like my inner competitor. Because I didn't really do well in the sports arena. But yeah, definitely in terms of like achieving things, that is where, that was kind of my arena.
So you talked about comparing yourself to cousins, family, brothers, your classmates, etc. Was it a desire to do better than others from you, or was that an expectation of comparison from parents, teachers, school?
I think it's always a bit of a combination because you get a sense of validation. If you come maybe top in your class, your parents kind of feed that. But then ultimately, I think all of these become an internal kind of battle where you're like, okay, yeah, what's next? What can I do to up my brother or up my, just be the best basically in whatever I'm doing? I think we all have that competitor within. So it just comes out in different forms, right?
Mm-hmm. Is your brother older or younger?
He's older than me. He's 3.5 years older than me.
Okay. Talk to me about growing up in an Indian family in northwest London.
We lived in a very humble home. We had a small flat between like 6 of us. So I lived with my parents, my grandparents, my dad's side, and my brother as well. So we grew up and yeah, it was obviously like really interesting because you could tell growing up that we were obviously of another culture, but living in northwest London, there was obviously an infest of like different cultures. So we had maybe a few Indians, but you had a lot of Caribbean people, a few white people and stuff like that. So it was just interesting to see. I think there was a lot of pride in your own culture growing up. I mean, we got that from our parents. And I think that is kind of them being immigrants from Africa, there is a bit of pride in the culture because they want to, prolong that a little bit. Yeah, so yeah, it was. I think it was nice. It was a good breath of fresh air, basically, growing up in that kind of culture.
And what were your parents like? What was the humble family beginning like for you?
Both my mum and my granddad actually have a similar story where they both basically grew up without a mum. My mum's mum passed away when she was 6 months. So her and her brother really had like quite a rough childhood because in those days, the man didn't really have to take care of the children. So with the mum not being there, they were pretty much in boarding school and etc. So she had quite a tough childhood and that really made her super affectionate when we were growing up. Like we were never deprived of love. Yes, we had to perform because they came with the survivor's mentality. I like to call it like a poverty mindset, where it's like there's never enough. Even if they're on comfortable salaries, going on holiday or whatever, there's like the mindset's there. Like they come here and they're like, yeah, we're here to survive. And that's obviously part of their journey.
Yeah.
My dad, however, grew up here from the age of 10. So definitely always felt a bit more modern. And yeah, like dad was like definitely one of our biggest supporters, like always really just had our back no matter what. If we're getting phone calls from teachers, he'd sit there, like, stand up to them, be like, yeah, but was it your fault as well? Like,
Was it your fault? It's not my golden child couldn't have possibly done anything wrong.
yeah, no, he knew we were little shits when we wanted to be, but he was very much like, he would have our back and stuff. Just like, and no fault of his own, really. It's just, he wanted us to really excel where perhaps he didn't as much, when both your parents are from a completely different culture, you don't necessarily have the support system in place growing up. So I don't think he wanted to give that to us so then we can go on and, do things perhaps maybe he wanted to do, but really just more about success, just driving that kind of like, oh, you guys will kill it. You guys will do X, Y, Z. And it does feed you a little bit. Like you're almost like, oh, I need to live up to this, what he's kind of saying. But behind that, there was just love. Like in my later life, as I know, when I haven't necessarily maybe got the things that he may have set out for, there was just love. There was never any feelings of disappointment or anything like that.
Let's talk about that in terms of that drive for success. What was your drive for success in your younger teenage, school, college, university, if you went, years? What was success to you growing up in an Indian household and the expectations that you had?
Yeah, so the expectations were that we were just there to almost like achieve, get the whole doctor, lawyer, like kind of...
With the Indian accent.
Yeah. Doctor. And obviously, like, we had a couple of like, you have a varying range of cousins in terms of achieving, but my parents would always put us up against like, the high achieving cousins. They obviously wanted that for us, right? They wanted us to be comfortable and stuff. So the drive's there. And then growing up where I did in Harlesden, it was like we would do a lot of work at home. So we were always, achieving really well in school and stuff. So then it's almost like you start to create a persona of success almost, and it's like, all right, this is go time, we've got an exam, whatever. And we will always just try and push ourselves to do that. Now, it obviously conflicted with maybe who I was because, I like to be rebellious. That started to come out. So obviously there must have been some inner conflict going on from when I was a child. Okay. I'd be in school Monday to Friday, really well behaved, really try my best. And then I'd go to like my religious school and my Gujarati school and I'd just be a complete little shit. So I think there must have been some sort of conflict going on in this drive for success because I guess it wasn't authentic.
Okay. So what happened?
That conflict was fairly managed by myself. Like I would very much like, know that this serious game was to, get into a good university and be on a pathway to earn a lot of money. And obviously a drive for that was to, overcome this poverty mindset that we as a family maybe had, It definitely wasn't like that. We were able to go on holiday like every year and stuff like that. It just, I guess, you feed off the way your parents speak and stuff. So you definitely feel that. So that was definitely a big drive. So I was like, this is the serious game, I just continued to, I guess, not necessarily put 100% into my education, but I just kind of knew how to play the game of getting good grades, good results, because it becomes a bit of a system at that point. You know what you have to do and stuff. But in school and stuff, when I was in high school, I had moved school to Harrow. I was still commuting from Harlesden, but I was surrounded by a lot more Indians. So it just felt that feeling of belonging was there a bit more because you're just surrounded by people who've had similar upbringing to you. So that allowed me to, just be able to mess around more, like really just, and I used to just get a really big thrill of like being a class clown. So obviously I think this is kind of like how the conflict's like growing, but I felt like I was in very much control of it. Like I knew I enjoyed to be rebellious, and I knew I also wanted to do well. They were almost like battered down into my core psyche. So yeah, applied for a maths degree at Warwick called Morse. So it sounds like maths, operations, research, statistics, economics.
Fun.
Even the choice for it, my cousin who had gone to Warwick a few years prior was like, oh, this is a really prestigious course. So I think that must have rung in my head the whole time. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I should back this. It's prestigious. So even like the decision making, you're not even aware of it at the time, what's driving you to make these decisions. Because you'll convince yourself otherwise that, oh, no, you're good at maths and this. But yeah, ended up getting accepted, and yeah, thus began my next chapter at Warwick.
So you went to Warwick University.
Yeah.
What's the journey at Warwick?
Yeah, so at Warwick, it was just a lot of fun, you know. I guess the shackles were off completely, so it was like, yes, you know, let's just create mayhem. And at that point, my goal was to completely just socialize. It's not even like I was like raised in such a household that was like constricted or anything like that. Our parents were very liberal, but I guess just having that freedom for the first time is just incredible.
Yeah.
So and I actually had a girlfriend with me at the time who was back home. So it kind of changes the vibe at university, because you're not looking for love or anything, or you're not looking for that. So you could just really like double down on socializing. And I loved it. It was just a chance to reinvent myself and just go all in, bring people together, which I love doing. And just, yeah, I think my immediate goal was to create a friendship group. And early on, like, I think we had a group of 10 boys who we're still friends with today. But yeah, that was definitely like something I put 100% into. And yeah, it came out, and, you know, we would have a lot of fun, and we were quite diverse. But I think a lot of us came from like humble beginnings. So I think that brought us together as well. We had a bit of variety as well, don't get me wrong. But yeah, it was just a cool vibe that we kind of created between us.
Okay. And so you left university having got great results, I'm sure.
No, actually not. Like, because I fucked around so much at university that I literally stopped doing my degree. Like, we would not really revise much. We would just have to memorize a lot. Like, I found out very early that maths is horrible at university level. Like, I was like, what, this is, because at school, it's like they teach you calculations and stuff. And then you get to university level and it's all theory. And it's like the theory of why the maths work. And I was like, no, this is horrible. And it's not even in English, it's in symbols. So you're sitting there, I'm trying to understand symbols, but because we've spent the first year and a half fucking around, we're so far behind. I ended up getting a 2-2 at university, which was really, I think I needed that at the time because it was humbling, because it was just like, oh, you can't just
sail through everything.
You can't just sail through everything. But it was calm. KPMG were like chilling. They were like, yeah, come through and stuff. Like, it's fine. And then I enrolled and I did my summer internship, because we got a summer as well. But then I did my grad job. I started my grad job that year.
And so what happens next?
Yeah, so I very much get to a point where I'm like, oh, like, obviously, so this is what I've been like trying to achieve, right? Like, it's like a life goal, you know, finally here, 21 years, I'm like, okay. And I guess with the goal so far away, it gives you time to just enjoy life and stuff. And when you're finally here and you're like, okay, this is what I've been working towards. For a while, you're just trying to get used to it, and you're just seeing what it is. And there's a track, you know, like if you do really well, the progression is there to make partner and earn obscene amounts of money and stuff. And I guess just the pathways start to open up. Then for me personally, and I have to say that, but I start to realize, I'm like, this is absolute dog shit. Like, what are we doing? Like, it just made no sense. You know, like, we worked in the government industry and we worked in healthcare, but it's like, you know, with hospitals, they were like paying these companies to solve a problem, but they would move from here to hear, and they're paying so much money. And obviously, you hear, my brother works in the NHS, so you hear all this stuff and you're like, God, this is horrible. Like, we're not really doing anything. But don't get me wrong, obviously, some people enjoy it and it's for them and stuff like that. I just felt like it was lacking a lot of purpose in terms of what I was doing. So, yeah, so it kind of like started like a bit of a battle within me about leaving. And I was like, I gotta leave. And I managed to make it work for maybe a year plus, like a year and a few months. But then very, very quickly, like I think, in that year, I was very much like, okay, I need to find something else to do. Seems like this is what, and I'd done a summer internship as well. So I kind of figured that a lot of the corporate working life was a bit like this, where almost like, you're glorified files person. You're sitting there just organizing stuff. And obviously you do grow into it, and I'm sure there's more like cool things to do, and, people do enjoy their jobs. But for me, I was just lacking a lot. And this probably comes down to the fact that I hadn't gone with my initial interests. So when I was young, right? So I was so far away from what I wanted to do. So I just kind of created an idea with a friend of mine and a few of us actually. We actually created like a little gang mentality within KPMG of the people who didn't want to be there. We're like, we hate it.
Okay, helpful.
Very toxic.
Yeah.
You can imagine.
Helpful for all sorts of different reasons. So what happened?
And at that time I was like using like marijuana regularly as well. So very much opening a different aspect of my life. So I kind of wanted to replicate the salary I was getting at KPMG with the most minimal amount of effort. And I was like, okay, I can work smart. This is what I've trained for. So I found that property has good avenues to make money fast, but also I was looking for these like get rich fast kind of schemes. So obviously like you're looking in like not very great places, to be honest, but I just wanted to get out. And I think what helped was a few months prior, a friend and I, the guy that I was actually doing the applications with, we were in Thailand and we had an experience with mushrooms. And it just kind of like took me out of the person I'd been building my whole life just for that trip, basically, that 6-7 hour trip. And it just gave a bit of space. And I was like, I'm so serious about all of this, about this game of trying to be better and be this guy or like old partner at KPMG. I was like, it just kind of gave me a bit of break and breathing room. And then I very much kind of like within 6 months decided to leave and start this property thing by myself. But mind you, I had no work ethic at this point. I had no understanding of how business works. And I was like, it's fine, I'll do it. Like, I'll be okay.
I'm clever enough. I can figure this out.
Yeah. So entitled at this point. But like, I had to be like that at that point to get to where I am today. But yeah, at that point, super entitled, like, I can do anything. And I didn't realize as well, like, I had been using marijuana, but I didn't really know why I was using it. It just became a bit of a crutch. A marijuana addiction is like so subtle. Like you use it a few days in a row and you start to just maybe feel better with yourself. And it's so subtle that, you're like, there's nothing wrong with this. I'm not out of control. Mm-hmm. But before you've been using it regularly for a while. So, and that normally does happen at university with students and stuff. But then I guess when it carries on, it's like you don't have the tools to ask yourself the question of like why I'm doing this. So I'm still doing it at this point. I'm trying to start a business and I'm trying to replicate my salary. But I'm also really interested in spirituality at this point, and it's a new interest that kind of comes out. And it's something my mum had kind of instilled in us since we were kids. So me and my brother definitely knew a lot because we went to like Jain school for like 15 years. Jainism is a religion it's like a sect of Hinduism that we're a part of. So the interest started to stem, and I guess I had more time now. So I just started to explore it more and more, but very like I'm a novice at this point. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm just like, I feel spiritual. And then I'd be like to my boys, do you guys kind of feel it too? They're like, yeah. But Yeah, so I didn't realize how big the shift would be. But after leaving KPMG, where I'm surrounded by grads and other students and stuff and people every day, now I'm by myself. But I had enough of a social network. But yeah, I guess I really started to explore myself at that time. I was like, I had work. I think in me, the inner child was like, it's 22, 23 years we've sat there, done this game, for what? Like, what is this all for?
The society norms, the family norms, you followed that path.
Yeah.
And you're now questioning why, what for?
Yeah, I think I was knee deep in an existential crisis at that point from probably like a few months into my tenure, my time at KPMG. Like, I was very much like, what is life about? Like, but I think I was scared to let myself really ask these questions because that would mean fundamental changes, right? And I kind of ask around, and I just felt that people didn't really know either. They were just knee deep in the game of life, you know, finding a job, getting there, progressing, and I was just really confused by it all. And when you're already feeling confused, taking any substance can kind of like further perpetuate you down that pathway where you're like you have no grounding anymore. And I didn't have grounding in myself because I didn't know who I was. I had created this persona to achieve, and I didn't even have any motivation to achieve anything because I just couldn't be asked. Without answering that major question of like, what is life? You know, like why the fuck are we here? And the only place that answers were starting to come from were people like, you know, Sadhguru or these YouTube spiritual gurus. And then I started to see, I was like, all right, there might be some books here. So very early in 2019, I started to, just start looking into these kind of spiritual books and stuff. And I started to see, I was like, oh, okay, there's some good stuff here. You know, I'm surprised people have just thrown it away and stuff. And I think when you're exploring that kind of thing, you have to be careful with what you take. Like, you have to have a lot of intent behind it. So I think for me, because I was smoking a lot at that point, you're kind of losing yourself in reality a little bit. And this kind of probably was a starting point from 2019 at the beginning to starting to lose myself in reality. But yeah, a few months later, in February, I just started to be more and more erratic. And, you know, you view yourself from the inside outwards sometimes. I don't know if you do that, but like when you can see yourself. And I just thought I was just becoming a bit more free. I think in life, we kind of really choose what we decide to let out. Mm-hmm. And when you start to let all of it out, it's very freeing because it's like a form of like radical acceptance to your whole self. So you start to feel accepted by yourself. And that's all you've ever wanted. Yeah, so then me and my parents I took them to a pilgrimage for Jains, like a very, very holy pilgrimage that not every Jain gets to go on. It's kind of like our Mecca, basically. And it was cool. Like, yeah, we went there and really enjoyed it out there and stuff. But I could just tell there was like two parts of me that were really just, you know, I could feel really high at points. And I could feel really like, I guess, angry, low. And I was like, okay. But I wasn't addressing any of this. I didn't know how to. I didn't have the tools to necessarily address it. Essentially what it is like you're in a state of presence with yourself and you're letting everything flow, feelings, emotions, and it's not necessarily coming outward. Like, you're respecting others at the same time and reality. I connected to something when I was out there on the pilgrimage, something very deep within me. But outwardly, I was still acting very erratic, you know, because I hadn't learned any ways to, like, discipline myself.
So you were acting erratically. What happens?
Yeah, so we get back to the UK and, I'm doing all sorts of things. I'm like walking outside without shoes. And obviously, like, a lot of people talk about this now. It's called grounding, right? But I don't know why I'm doing it. I just feel I want to just connect with the earth. And I'm like, this feels good. And people around me are like, bro, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And I went to one of my friends, his sister was having a party at her house and a few of us went around And at this point, I had already there'd been conflict in some of these friendship groups because of the erratic behavior. Naturally, it does push people away. You start to behave in a certain way. But I was in such a state of yeah, it is what it is. And I genuinely felt like I didn't care. And I was just flowing through life. And I think I was so present in that moment with how I was and stuff. But yeah, I think that party is when people start to really notice, because it's been a while since they've seen me, because I've been to India and come back, and they were like, oh, okay, he doesn't look too great. But obviously, you never tell the person who's like that, who probably can't receive it at that point. The next few days start to become more and more intense, and I have a vision of who the Hindus believe as Lord Shiva. And I was having way more religious kind of thoughts and stuff like that, and at times feeling what one could describe as religious ecstasy. And it was induced as well. Marijuana played a role in that as well. I don't think I was naturally going to get there naturally. But yeah, I hallucinated and I saw a vision of Lord Shiva, and it was in all the manicness I was feeling at that point, there was just a moment of peace. And yeah, it was just, I remember it even now, I was just in the temple in my house, in the flat. I was looking out and I could just see a light figure of Lord Shiva appear. It was huge, it was 10 feet. And I was like, yo. And then the moment stopped, the vision went, and immediately the voice in my head kicked in, and it was oh, dude, you're a messiah. Sick. Go upstairs, roll a zoo. I'm like, what's my first miracle gonna be? You're so wrapped in it at this point. You don't even, and at this point, although I can tell from the observing point of view, I don't know the difference between the voice in my head and who I am. So I believe I'm that voice. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. We must be a messiah. Cool. What should we do? And then, I was just like, oh, you know what? In this day and age, people don't really believe in God and stuff. Now we know it's real. We got to do something crazy to kind of bring this belief. Why don't we bring someone back from the dead? That'd be amazing. And I'm like, oh, of course, eureka. So then I'm on this pathway of trying to make this miracle happen. I have no idea how anything works at this point. I'm just feeling things within myself, right? And naturally, you can imagine for the people around me, I'm seeming way more erratic, out of control. And I think within the next few days, I basically didn't sleep for a few days, and this really kind of brings it out and stuff. I think one morning, because I hadn't slept all morning, I must have just got in the car and started driving. And yeah, just experienced some, I guess, very, wild thoughts, and I don't know the difference at that point between, I'm so out of control at that point, and I'm like, oh, spiritually I read that you can only die when you're meant to die. So I have thoughts, I'm like, oh, why not take the car on the other side of the road and bring it back? I don't more just take it on the other side of the road and see if I die or what. I just so, brazy, absolute full confidence. I did do that. And to this day, obviously, I think it possibly was a hallucination, but from what I experienced was going on the other side of the road, the car almost, and the memory is vivid for me, right? It's as real as real life, but it's the car basically just starts going through other cars as if there is a level of protection happening. And I just have an out-of-body experience moment at that point where I'm looking at myself and I'm like, oh, fuck. And I could see that me as the Priyesh as a human is completely manic at this point. And I'm finally having the first chance to see myself, because it must have been distorted vision for a few days. And then as this hallucination continued and the car came back onto the normal side of the road, for me it was real, right? It wasn't a hallucination in my mind. But yeah, I pull the car over to the hard shoulder and I feel this moment where I come back into my body and I'm like, holy shit, what the fuck have I just done? What? Because I feel like I've broken what is a matrix. I'm like, what have I done? What is going on? what is reality? So I just literally like, because now I'm backing myself, the thoughts are there, it feels very like strong. And yeah, I just leave the car keys, leave the car, leave my wallet, leave my phones, and I just get out of the car and I start wandering around St. Albans, because that's how far I got. I made it one junction on the M1 with all this happening. So now I start wandering around St. Albans and I'm just really just confused. And I feel like I've broken the matrix. So my narrative at that point is, okay, now God's going to come and explain what life is about, and I've just broken something. So I'm going to get this explanation. You know, it makes sense. So, well,
it's all going to make sense in a minute.
Why would you not get this explanation, you know? But yeah, I'm just walking around for maybe like a couple hours. And then, yeah, very, very like, when I go back to those memories, like it took a long time to process them naturally. But yeah, it was like, just someone who's just experienced a break in reality and is just completely bewildered by it. No idea what to make of it and do, and just completely like confused. Within a couple hours, I got picked up by the police. I just got picked up by this car. So I was like, come. God's finally come to pick me up. I'm like chilling. God, what took you so long, man? Fucking hell. And I get taken to an assessment unit. And it's called Section 316. And yeah, at that point, they assess you for like, I think 2 days. But if they're unsure, then it could be 3 days. So yeah, that's the first, I guess, checkpoint there. They just, assessed me for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm. And so you're now in hospital?
Kind of. I think the assessment unit was outside of the hospital.
Okay.
So yeah, so they assessed me for 2-3 days and I was just not okay. Like, I'm so wrapped up in the personal life of Priyesh. So then all these elements of my personal life are feeding the narrative. Like, inside us, we have the outside world is almost replicated in the internal world. You know, there's an aspect of that. So that's all very active in me. But I'm also, the lines between my internal world and the external world are completely blurred. So I feel like whatever is happening in here is also happening outside. So in this feeling I'm getting, I'm like, oh, everybody knows what's happening to me, that I'm, experiencing this connection with God and whatever, and no one's talking to me, no one's telling me like what's going on. So you're really like, your mind's really going through it at this point. And it's almost like I'm experiencing some level of ego death, but I don't know what that is. So I think I'm dying mentally. But it feels like that, but then my body's still there. So obviously like there's element of being alive. So within these 3 days, they're assessing me and this is what's going through me. So yeah, within 3 days, like, this guy's getting sectioned. Like, he's not okay. And yeah, that night I ended up, within like 3 days, like I ended up in the psychiatric unit at the hospital I was born at. Okay. Quite a round circle, right?
Yeah. And so you're sectioned, your family are aware at this point.
Yeah.
And you're going through treatment. Yeah.
So almost just sectioning is like 30 days you have in there, and they'll give you medicine and stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much the treatment. But you're also surrounded by a lot of other people who are going through hallucinations and different forms of mental illness, basically. And at this point, they tell me that I have psychosis. Never understood that word before. I'm like, what is that?
This episode is brought to you by Play for Change. Play for Change brings together leadership coaching, expert facilitation, and builds communities. They help craft real connections, spark learning, and turn play into powerful experiments to enable better relationships with yourself and others around you. Let's redefine how we connect and learn through play. To find out more, go to playforchange.co.uk, links in the show notes below. So you're sectioned, you've been told you have psychosis, you're on some form of medication.
Yeah.
You're there for 30 days.
Yeah. So, and in there, you're very much quick to play the game and get out, because like, it's weird. It's like, you know how babies, when they see other babies, they interact differently, right? So as patients, we would interact differently than we would with the staff. And very much it's like, all right, to get out, you got to act normal. And I'm like, okay, there's a game here. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm very much still in this state of like out of reality, but I can play the game well. You know, I've done it my whole life. So I was out within 15 days. I was like, cool. But I was not okay. And, you know, it must have been a really tough time for my family. At that point, I didn't understand why, but there was a desire to understand what had happened in that kind of like state. So yeah, within a few weeks, I was back in, sectioned again. For someone who's like, you know, built a persona where they want to be the guy. And I'd done that at university, I'd done that at KPMG, I'd, you know, become this, you know, the guy. To now be like coming out of the psychiatric unit, having had psychosis, bro, you're at the bottom of your own social hierarchy. So very quickly, that reality was like so murky, so depressive. And it kind of brought on an onslaught of depression. That was possibly, like, that was definitely already there actually. But it was just very intense. And within a few weeks, as I started to get more grounded with reality, suicide thoughts started to come in thick and fast, you know, because it didn't feel the same chilling with anybody. Because obviously now you're psychosis boy. People look at you differently. They care for you, but you're not able to see that because you've labeled yourself and you're living with that stigma. So yeah, suicide thoughts start coming thick and fast, and you see how real it can become, like for anybody, you know. Like it can be very real, and you know, you start Googling ways, you know, you just feel so disconnected from life completely. And I think because at life at some point I felt that connection to the outside world, I knew that this wasn't it, this feeling. And I knew obviously I'd listened to this voice and ended up having psychosis. I was like, okay, this voice is the same voice.
Yeah.
So I was able to differentiate that. But that voice is so strong, it's almost like it's given up on life. So it's like, yeah, fuck it, let's spin it. Let's start fresh, you know, next life. But I was able to withstand that and, you know, slowly and surely just kind of like create some distance with that. And it just got like the less you identify with something, the less real it becomes for you. So just started to disidentify with the suicide thoughts more. Still felt really depressed though, like really struggling to get out of bed, you know. Felt like a failure, you know. I'd built this whole life to be such a big success, and now I'm here recovering from an episode of psychosis, or 2 episodes even, and I'm just like, what has happened? This is crazy. And one good thing was that I was closer to finding out what life was about, because I had experienced such religious ecstasy within to know that there is some deeper form of reality. But I feel disconnected from that as well, because I'm trying to balance living in the real world. And not put people's alarm bells going, thinking, oh yeah, he's back in that state. So
you're thinking about everybody else at this point, as well as listening to your inner voice.
Yeah. You're definitely listening. You're definitely worried because you've seen it. Like the whole vibe in the house has shifted. And the whole vibe with your friends has shifted. So you're really feeling that. And I do think that, like, I feel other people's emotions quite intensely sometimes. I think that's possibly why, like, I hadn't gone down my own path of life so strongly, because I was just so aware. Like the social awareness I have is like quite high. So you're so super aware. You're living a life of like almost being super depressed. You're working your way out of the suicidal thoughts. So you're like, okay, one step at a time. And it got to the point where I was literally like, all right, let's just, you know, if we brush our teeth and if we shower, brilliant.
Yeah.
So I had to start redefining what success was, because that's basically like why I was suffering so much. It was the mental labels that I had created for myself. So yeah, I had to start to redefine success without really knowing, to be honest, what I was doing. And I was like, okay, cool, let me try go play sports this week. Let me go play football with my brother, you know? And it was really blessing having him in the house at the time. He's now moved out, living with his wife in Leicester. But at the time, it was a blessing having all of them, actually, the whole support network. But you don't value it at the time because you're so low that you don't even, like, the will to live is something you're debating. So it's just to feel that love outwardly is just almost...
You're just not feeling it at the moment.
Yeah, and you have to deal with all the conflicts you created whilst being all the lead up to psychosis. So you're very much like understanding that certain friendships aren't there anymore. And now you're feeling all of that. You know, you're suffering with it because you're grounded again. And it does get better. You just have to really grind through it, basically. And I think it's a very... Like, yes, the episode was important, but this period was like super important. I started to feel like a little bit like myself again, you know. Nowhere near there fully, but yeah. And it got to November, so it'd been maybe like 4 or 5 months of recovery, maybe like 6 months now. And I feel actually pretty good on this day. And my brother's like, why don't you come with me to my friend's engagement? And I was like, okay. And his partner was going at the time. I actually was, you know, enjoying myself, having a few drinks, actually feeling a bit more like myself. And yeah, got on the train home that day and passed out. So I passed out on the train. And the funniest thing happened because I got woken up. I'd missed my stop. And this girl was waking me up. And I was like, who is this? But I was like, Fez. And then she's like helping me. And she's like taking me like, oh, why don't you come off the station? And I was like, oh, okay. And I look and she's like super cute. And I was like, oh. And I was obviously very drunk because I wouldn't do this sober. I definitely didn't have the confidence soberly, but I was just like, I'm going to kiss her. I'm going to kiss this random girl who's helping me in my drunk state. And I'm just going to go for it.
And that's the thoughts you're having at this moment?
Yeah, just waking up, I'm like, boom. And I go for it and then we kiss. And then I think she was also drunk as well. And we end up she's like, look, I live here. Why don't you just sober up and, you know, make your way back? Just got my Uber, left, and yeah, later on that night at 6 a.m. I realized I was like, I didn't get her number. So I looked at where the pickup point of my last Uber ride was, and I was like, 6 a.m. got the Uber back to her. And I started knocking on the door, which I think looked similar because I was a bit sober at this point. It turned out it was her. And yeah, we were, you know, we exchanged numbers and stuff, and then we were messaging every day since, and she's now my partner who lives with me. But yeah, that's how we met. So that was a really kind of like shiny point in this journey, you know. And then we started to chill more. She only lived 5 minutes away from my Harlesden house, which is that's crazy when you think about it. And then yeah, we started just talking more and more. And I finally found, I think I had a couple spaces where I could go to where I didn't have to be Priyesh who had psychosis. I could just be Priyesh.
Because she doesn't know that version of you.
Yeah, I did tell her.
The previous version.
Yeah. Yeah, she doesn't know either of them. So I can actually just start to be myself a little bit. But I did tell her what had happened and stuff, and she just couldn't really believe it, really. She was like, oh, okay, well, it doesn't really make sense to me because you seem so put together right now. So, and I was like, no, trust me, I was not. But yeah, I just slowly started to kind of build more and more back into life. You know, it was really helpful seeing someone. But there was a big question mark around what had happened to me still. And I was studying a lot and I really wanted to figure it out. Because I was like, what happened? Like, what did we experience? Yeah, they're calling it psychosis, which means break from reality. But it was just so much more than that, you know? And I was like, I really need to figure this out because like it's not out there. The doctors don't know the answers. They know it from the treating point of view, but they don't know it from the first person experience. So yeah, I was just really interested in it. And I was still smoking a little bit. And within a few months, I started to smoke more. And I think COVID had hit by this point as well. So I just started to smoke more again and almost like willfully take myself back into that state, which obviously is super dangerous and a very reckless behavior and stuff like that, looking back in hindsight and stuff. But I don't know, it felt important at that time. And I experienced an episode again. And this time, I was very clear when I was inside the psychiatric unit, because we had moved houses as well, so we were living in Stanmore, so I was in Norfolk Park Hospital, And this time Hannah's actually there as well. I think we were just official at that point, and she didn't really have to stay after the episode and stuff, but she wanted to and stuff. So yeah, but this time I made a very clear kind of vow to God. I was like, hey, look, like, I definitely have not been able to take myself out, whatever I've been going through for the last year. But I know you're real. So I'm here to dedicate my life to you in whatever capacity that means. And I will do that. And I'll show you. I just need you to be there for me and help me. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, like, it's like one of those phrases, I was thinking about this yesterday, actually. You know, in Harry Potter, they're like, you know, in Hogwarts, those who ask for help will receive it. Dumbledore says that. And I felt like it was that kind of moment because I really just, backed it. Instead of being this, I'm spiritual, guys, like, I'm just spiritual boy, whatever. I was like, no, you know, I'm actually going to be devotion. I'm actually going to devote myself and actually be a devotee, like actually do that. And obviously growing up in Indian culture, living in the UK, there's a bit of a stigma towards it. Like, oh man, that's just gross. It's just like Indians grow up around it so much and it just becomes a bit of like, you become a bit anti towards it. You're smiling, so I'm thinking you know this.
Some people do, some people, you know, embrace it.
Yeah. But it's easy to kind of go the other way, right? But then I just started to embrace it. And then for this next 6 months, I started to just, you know, pray. And there's this thing in the Hindu tradition called kirtan, which is like gospel, but instead of songs towards God, you're singing gods, normally towards Krishna, but then they have different mantras towards different deities and stuff. And I'm just backing this because I understand I know nothing. As much as I pretend to know everything, I know nothing. And it was just, it started the biggest transformation of my life. That was in June of 2020. And I just started to, you know, within 6 months, I decided to, you know, go 6 months without smoking weed. Obviously my support network was there as well, so it was helping me tap into that more and more. But I just started to feel like myself again. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. And I can't even take any credit for this because I know what I'm praying to and I know what that's doing. And it's just putting a light on in all this chaos that was been there for such a long time. And I think there's a point I remember, I think it's maybe like a year after that last episode in June 2020. And I started to feel how I did before I was confused. So before I got to KPMG, I started to feel like that again. And I started to go past that. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. You know, I started to feel more fulfilled in myself. And I realized that, you know, I was able to see my life so differently. And why I enjoyed these connections with people so much, you know, was the ability to serve people. You know, whatever capacity, if you needed to chat to me, if you wanted to go out and you needed some time away from your family, I just like to serve people in the most chilled out way, you know, make someone feel super comfortable and stuff. And I was like, okay. And I love communicating. So then the idea for the Self Love Clinic came where I would, you know, help people.
So we've now been through 3 episodes. Mm-hmm. You've been sectioned. You've got psychosis. You've come out of the 3rd one in acceptance of your appreciation, your love, your devotion to God. You've started some mantras and you started accepting where you are and what you want, what you think the next phase is. And that's helping you on this journey.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think the accepting of where I was and understanding that I needed help was pivotal. I think that's the whole point. Like, when you want help, you have to be in complete surrender of the fact that you can't help yourself anymore. And it's actually step 6 in that Alcohol Anonymous thing where you surrender your problem to God in their 12 steps. And it's a very profound step that they have because it's basically, if we take the assumption of God being real, God's not going to intervene into your life until you say, like, full hand in hand, I need your help. I can't solve this without you.
Right.
because otherwise God's getting involved and God won't get involved otherwise, That's the idea behind this step, basically.
And so you've gone through all of this. Your definitions of where you started, where you are now are changing. And you've come up with this concept of Self Love Clinic. Mm-hmm. What is the Self Love Clinic? Who is Priyesh at this point, and who does Priyesh want to be in the future?
That actually opens like a massive question of who someone is, because obviously like that was the question I guess I was asking, like, who am I and stuff. And I still didn't necessarily know at the point when I created the Self Love Clinic, but I knew I wasn't this human. I knew there was something deeper within me that I was. Some people now perhaps I would call it awareness. There's an awareness. I am. And I have different hats that I can put on, different identities I can put on at different times, like we all do, that combine different amounts of our qualities and characteristics. But I knew for the Self-Love Clinic, I needed to hone in on the most like truest parts of myself, the person that believed in people, like really, truly believed in people. And I see someone and I see everything they already are, not all the bads and the good, but I know they got it. And I know that it's just up to them and they need a space to just draw it out. So then I needed to do that for myself. So I almost became the first client for Self Love Clinic in this pathway. And I was open to devotion and stuff like that. So I used that as a pathway. And then I started to just do the work, started to read, started to meditate. That's the actual work, the meditations, the readings, doing the devotional work and stuff like that. That's genuinely like where the real work can begin. And you can actually start to bring peace, and joy, and love into all these emotions, to whatever extremes they are, however sad you can be, when you give yourself the space in that sadness to feel it completely in its entirety, there's peace around it. There's joy in feeling it. And yeah, you're not going to necessarily behave as if you were ecstatic, but you're okay. You can feel this feeling, not become it, and behave accordingly. So that's where the real kind of work kind of became very real for me. Started doing a counseling course, and I just started to apply all this on myself. And this was towards the end of 2020, but carried on in 2021. And then I was very clear I wanted to build the Self Love Clinic. And who I was, I feel like I didn't really, like, as long as I was myself, as long as I was true to my values, because I understood that, we have values as people, like, core values of like, being loving, kind, humble and stuff like that. Going back to all of these teachings are there in the scriptures, but they felt very real in me. So I was like, okay, damn, this is what I go back to. And if I'm not behaving according to this, it's okay. Nothing wrong with it. But now we know we're acting out of alignment.
Right.
That just took me all the way to February of 2022, where I launched the Self Love Clinic.
What is the new version of success for you at this point?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I had to redefine that a few times. Even creating the Self Love Clinic, it brings back all that, ambition and all that, like old versions of old personas and old hats. Success is like one of those things now that for me, it feels like, just being able to be present in what you're doing and giving whatever you can in that moment. That's what success looks like to me.
So tell us about the journey of building up the Self Love Clinic and what it stands for you today.
So for me, like in 5 words, it's almost like transforming your trauma into your power. And what I mean by that is that bad things happen to us, but our minds are almost the centerpiece of creating the narrative around it. So we have the opportunity to use these crazy negative traumas that different people face, and it's super hard, but we can use it as a tool for motivation. It can become, our superpower, And what I mean by that is that when someone can redefine the events that have happened to them and not have the negative self-talk around it, they have the opportunity to transform that event into a life-changing event that will help them serve the world in whatever capacity they want. And that's what I try to do at the clinic. You know, when people come and wherever they want to go on that journey, I try to provide them with the tools. And not everybody's religious, so, you know, there's different tools that one has to use. Inner belief and believing in themselves is always a great start point. Maybe they believe in God in a different way, but using whatever tools, whatever the beliefs are, working with them to kind of help them heal. Different tools like meditation, breath work, and almost just the space that I try and offer allows them to kind of brainstorm and, you know, really think about their lives in a different way. And it takes time. All this healing takes time because there's no instant fix to it. But with dedication to yourself, anybody can get there and anybody can live the life they've always wanted to live.
Is there any advice that you can share with our listeners?
They already have everything they need within them. It may not feel like that sometimes, but it's there. And when you take time to cultivate it and let it grow, it will be your biggest strength. You know, you'll never have to look outwardly for any source of, for motivation or drive or, you know, fulfillment. It's all there within you. Just for anybody else who's out there, who's suffering from the clutches of the mind and stuff, I know it can be difficult. I know it's hard and stuff. But I just want you to know that there is a way out. And there's always a way out. And it may seem like the hardest task, the most daunting task, but just know, taking that first step of just believing in yourself, you know, that is the step. And we just walk 1 foot at a time, whether it means that your task of the day is just to brush your teeth, that's okay. We're far too harsh on ourselves, and being kind to ourselves really does create that space where you can start to get out there and, you know, seek the help that you need. There's so much great help out there nowadays, and it's worth it because you're worth it. We all are.
We started with who is Priyesh. We've just had a bit of a conversation, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to answer that question again, which is, who's Priyesh? I think Priyesh is just, it's probably, like I said, just a human being living his adventure. And I get to be the beneficiary of observing from behind the scenes. Thank you.
No worries.
If you enjoyed that conversation, then please share A Class of Their Own podcast with your friends and family and keep spreading the word to those that haven't discovered us yet. It makes a huge impact on our ability to have the people you want. Keep being you through connection, learning and play. You are a class of your own.